In this video, I'm going to be explaining everything that you need to know about tattoo needles, from the diameter to configuration, so that whether you're lining or shading, you can tattoo with confidence. My name is Denzel. I've been tattooing 8 years, and one of the first things that we went over in my apprenticeship was, of course, tattoo needles. Before you can start tattooing, you're going to need to understand the needles that you're working with, and most importantly, why they matter. Without this knowledge, you can't safely work on clients or create high quality tattoos. On a standard box of needles or cartridges, you'll see a set of numbers and letters that look like this. Now, this code is going to give you 4 key details about the needles you're going to be working with. This code is going to show you the diameter, the needle count, the configuration, and the taper. The diameter, or the gauge of the needle, is going to tell you what the thickness of the needle is at the widest point of that needle. And this number is going to be shown by the first 2 numbers on the needle packet. Tattoo artists will generally use 3 common diameters. You have the 12, the 10, and the 8. Needles labeled with a 12 or a 0.35 millimeter are going to be referred to as standard needles. This is going to be the standard diameter that is used across many tattoo artists in the industry, and this is what I normally recommend beginners to start with. These needles are going to be great for color packing, color shading, black and gray, whatever you're going to need to get done. These needles can get the job done. Because they have a little bit of a bigger diameter, they are able to hold a little bit more ink, but because they are bigger, they do cause a little bit more trauma to the skin. Needles that are labeled with the number 10 or have a 0.30 millimeter are going to be called double zeros. Needles that are labeled with the number 10 have a little bit of smaller spacing in between each of the needles, allowing for smoother black and gray work and better color blends. Needles labeled with the number 8 are going to be the true Bugpin needles, and they have a 0.25 millimeter diameter. And I normally recommend beginners stay away from these needles. The only time that I've known artists to use them are going to be if they're doing super fine details in portraits, or they need a needle that they're going to have to really build up the shading. However, due to their size, they're not really recommended for color packing or solid black fills with most tattoos that beginners are going to be doing anyway. Now we have needle count. The needle count is going to be the second number listed on a needle packet and is going to refer to the number of needles that are grouped together in a single cartridge. So a 1207 RL is going to have 7 needles, while a 1014 RL is going to have 14 needles. Now, there are a ton of different needles that range from a single needle all the way to 143 needles in a single cartridge, which is just wild. Now, you don't have to get all of those needles. Matter of fact, what I'm gonna do for you guys is I'm gonna leave my needle blueprint down in the description below so that you have all this information on different needles, what they do, what they mean, and also my recommended beginner needle list that I tell all my apprentices get these specific needles. So if you wanna pick that up, check out the link in the description to get your blueprint now. Moving on to the configurations of a needle. There are going to be many different styles of needles that you can get, but they mainly fall into 4 different configurations. What the configuration tells you is it tells you how the needles are arranged to impact the specific function or use of the needle. First up, you have round liners. As the name suggests, these needles are going to be mainly used for lining. Now, the round liner has a circular cluster of needles that form to a point. And depending on the needle count that you have, you can range from needles that create a very fine line or needles that can create a very bold line. It all really depends on what you're using. Next up, we have round shaders. Same thing, as the name suggests, these are going to be used for shading. Similar to round liners as well, they also form a cluster, but instead of the needles coming to a sharp point, they are a little bit spaced out. This allows for a very easy use of saturating either color, black and gray, getting into small areas, or blending. Also, because the needles are a little bit more spaced out, it causes the needles to pick up a little bit more ink, also making them ideal for shading. Magnum needles are going to have 2 rows of needles that are stacked against one another in a flat, even formation. These needles are also spaced out a little bit more so that they can get wider coverage when shading. These needles are typically good for like color packing, usually traditional work, I would recommend to use these needles. But you can also manipulate these mags in a way where you can create line work or different textures. So definitely get comfortable using them. Curved mags are going to be pretty similar to regular mags. However, these needles are arranged where the needles form in an arch, and having these two end needles be a little bit offset allows for softer black and gray work, as you don't have such hard edges being made when you're tattooing. So if you're looking to do more smooth black and gray, I would definitely recommend using a curved mag. Final thing we need to talk about is the taper. The taper is going to be where the needle's thickest point will thin out or narrow out to the point of the needle. From where the needle goes from being thick to thin, this is going to be the length of the taper. And the taper length is going to range all the way from 1.5 all the way to 8 millimeters in length. So generally, the shorter the taper, the better it is for line work and really putting in solid lines, where the longer the taper is going to be used for if you really want to have a finer line or a finer point. Some people will use them mainly with shading, but really what you have to know is that the shorter the taper, the thicker the line is going to be, because the distance that it takes for you to get to the thickest point of that needle is going to be shorter. So a longer taper line is going to be a lot thinner than if you were to have a shorter taper. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Like I said earlier, there's going to be a needle blueprint in the description below. So if you want to pick that up, go ahead and check that out. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow for more content. If you guys need anything as well, please let me know in the comments.